Why do 68% of stubborn belly fat cases resist every calorie deficit, while your liver silently pumps out pure glucose at 2 in the morning? The secret isn't willpower or carbs, it is a hidden enzymatic loop inside your deep visceral fat cells that actually manufactures its own stress hormones. Today we will dissect the exact 3-step biological trap tying fragmented sleep to cortisol spikes and reveal the 5 protocol shifts to finally break it. Most doctors tell you to just sleep more and eat less, completely missing how your brain's adrenal alarm system gets physically rewired after dark. If you want the real, unfiltered medical science behind metabolism and longevity without the diet industry fluff, subscribe to the channel and let's get into it. To understand why you are gaining weight overnight, look first at your healthy diurnal rhythm, where cortisol surges at dawn to smoothly wake your brain. By 9 at night, that hormone level should plunge by nearly 90%. Signaling your pineal gland to release melatonin for deep cellular repair. However, chronic work stress and late-night blue light trick your hypothalamus into perceiving an immediate physical threat right when you try to rest. Your hypothalamus fires corticotropin-releasing hormone down to the pituitary gland, blasting emergency signals right to your adrenal glands atop both kidneys. Instead of dropping into restorative slumber, your bloodstream suddenly floods with fresh cortisol at midnight, keeping your nervous system trapped in high alert. This elevated nocturnal cortisol completely blocks stage 3 slow-wave sleep, the critical phase where your brain clears metabolic waste and resets insulin sensitivity. As a result, you suffer silent microarousals every 40 minutes, forcing your liver to dump stored glycogen directly into your blood as quick energy. That sudden midnight glucose surge triggers an immediate emergency insulin spike while you lie motionless in bed, locking your body out of fat burning. When your alarm rings at 7, that sleep deficit has already driven up ghrelin, your hunger hormone, while suppressing leptin, your satiety signal. Your starved prefrontal cortex instantly demands fast-acting carbohydrates and sugary lattes, seeking a dopamine hit to compensate for the exhausting chemical deficit. Here is where the contrarian science gets fascinating. Your deep abdominal fat tissue contains 4 times more cortisol receptors than subcutaneous fat under your skin. Think of your visceral fat cells as aggressive chemical sponges that specifically grab floating cortisol molecules right out of your circulation all day long. Once bound, cortisol teams up with elevated insulin to hyperactivate lipoprotein lipase, an enzyme that pulls circulating triglycerides directly into your abdominal storage. Even worse, your belly fat manufactures an intracellular enzyme called 11-beta-HSD1, which continually converts dormant cortisone back into active cortisol locally. This means your visceral fat literally operates its own internal stress factory, generating up to 30% of your body's total active cortisol. Meanwhile, chronically high circulating cortisol breaks down your valuable skeletal muscle tissue into amino acids to fuel even more liver glucose production. Losing that metabolically active muscle mass steadily drops your resting metabolic rate, burning roughly 200 fewer calories every single 24 hours. Now the vicious loop is fully sealed. Poor sleep elevates cortisol, which stores visceral fat, destroying muscle and fragmenting your next night of sleep.
This explains why cutting another 500 calories or spending $80 on stimulant fat burners only makes your adrenal distress dramatically worse. To dismantle this trap permanently, you do not need more restriction. You must actively reset your central hypothalamic biological clock starting at dawn. The first mechanical lever requires exposing your retinas to 10,000 lux of natural outdoor daylight within 30 minutes of waking up. Those specific morning blue photons hit your suprachiasmatic nucleus, setting a precise 14-hour countdown timer for natural melatonin release tonight. Second, never pour coffee into an empty stomach at 7 in the morning, which forces an unnecessary artificial cortisol surge right at baseline. Instead, delay caffeine by 90 minutes and consume 30 grams of complete protein first to stabilize blood glucose and blunt morning adrenal overreaction. Once your morning cortisol spike is properly anchored, we must address the critical evening thermal drop required to halt midnight belly fat accumulation. When your head hits the pillow after a high-stress day, your hypothalamus should normally shut down the adrenal assembly line completely. Instead, chronically elevated evening cortisol keeps your central nervous system trapped in sympathetic overdrive, effectively treating your dark bedroom like a war zone. This persistent chemical alarm blocks your brain from entering restorative slow-wave delta sleep, where physical cellular repair and metabolic reset actually happen. Without that deep restorative stage, your body panics at dawn and pumps out even more cortisol to artificially jolt you awake. That morning cortisol spike directly crashes your primary satiety hormone, leptin, making your brain completely deaf to full stomach signals by noon. Simultaneously, your gastric cells release a massive surge of ghrelin, the hunger hormone that screams at your brain for fast calories. In fact, losing just 2 hours of sleep increases your next day calorie intake by nearly 400 calories without you noticing. Those 400 extra calories are not craved randomly. Your cortisol-drenched brain specifically demands dense carbohydrates and salted fats for quick dopamine. Here is where the metabolic trap tightens. Cortisol signals your liver to immediately dump stored glucose into your bloodstream via gluconeogenesis. Your liver floods the system with sugar because it believes you must literally outrun a predator, despite you sitting at a desk. To handle that sudden blood sugar surge, your pancreas frantically secretes insulin to push floating glucose back into your muscle cells. However, high circulating cortisol blocks the GLUT4 glucose transporters on your muscle tissue, effectively locking the cellular doors against insulin. With your muscles refusing entry, insulin has only one place left to shove that toxic excess glucose right into your fat cells. And this is not just any fat. Visceral adipose tissue deep inside your abdomen contains 4 times more cortisol receptors than subcutaneous fat. Those abundant visceral receptors act like a magnetic sponge, eagerly sucking up floating blood lipids and storing them around your internal organs. Even worse, visceral fat produces the enzyme 11-beta-HSD1, which converts dormant cortisone right back into active cortisol directly inside your belly fat. This local hormonal factory means your waistline becomes an independent cortisol generator, creating a self-sustaining vicious cycle regardless of daily emotional stress. As your visceral fat expands, it releases inflammatory cytokines like interleukin-6 that cross your blood-brain barrier and further disrupt your sleep architecture.
Now you are trapped inside a biochemical closed loop. Poor sleep elevates cortisol, cortisol creates visceral fat, and visceral fat destroys tonight's sleep. You might spend thousands of dollars on diet plans and gym memberships, yet this nocturnal hormonal glitch renders traditional calorie deficits completely useless. When your cells stay insulin resistant from chronic nighttime cortisol, even a healthy 300-calorie salad gets processed with maximum fat storage efficiency. In addition, elevated nocturnal cortisol severely suppresses your thyroid peroxidase enzyme, slowing down your active T3 thyroid hormone production while you sleep. With less active T3 hormone reaching your mitochondria, your baseline resting metabolic rate drops sharply by up to 8% within days. This means you are burning roughly 150 fewer calories every single 24 hours, simply because your sleep cortisol rhythm is broken. Furthermore, late evening cortisol blunts the nocturnal pulse of human growth hormone, the vital repair signal responsible for maintaining lean calorie-burning muscle mass. As you gradually lose muscle tissue from low growth hormone, your daily metabolic capacity shrinks further, making weight gain almost mathematically inevitable. Notice how this explains why restricting calories without fixing your circadian rhythm causes muscle loss instead of shedding stubborn belly fat. Your gut microbiome also suffers directly from this loop, as excess systemic cortisol thins the protective mucosal layer lining your intestinal wall. That compromised intestinal barrier allows endotoxins like lipopolysaccharide to leak into your bloodstream, triggering systemic inflammation that drives even more cortisol secretion. To break this destructive biological trap, you must first dismantle the physiological triggers, firing off in your bedroom right before midnight. When evening cortisol stays artificially elevated by even 15%, your liver executes a biological emergency protocol known as gluconeogenesis. It strips amino acids from your muscle tissue and converts them directly into circulating glucose right while you are lying motionless in bed. That midnight blood sugar spike forces your pancreas to pump out insulin just to shove the excess glucose into your cells, but because your muscle cells are insulin resistant at night, that glucose is only one place left to go: visceral belly fat. This creates a vicious metabolic trap where your body actively stores deep visceral fat while you sleep, burning 0 calories in return. But the damage goes beyond your liver. That same night of high cortisol completely hijacks your brain's primary appetite control center. By 7 a.m. after a high cortisol night, your levels of leptin, the hormone that tells your brain you are full, drop by nearly 18%. Simultaneously, ghrelin, which is your powerful hunger hormone, surges by 28%, turning on a primal craving for calorie-dense and hyperpalatable carbohydrates. Think of your brain like a broken thermostat where the sensor is severed. You can eat 1,000 calories for breakfast and still feel starving. Why? Because your hypothalamus is chemically convinced you just survived a famine, demanding instant glucose to refill the glycogen stores you never actually emptied. And what you crave matters enormously. Cortisol directly activates a powerful brain chemical called neuropeptide Y, which specifically triggers intense cravings for sugar and fat. When you eat those high sugar foods under elevated cortisol, an enzyme inside your belly fat called 11-beta-HSD, one immediately shifts into overdrive. This enzyme acts as an internal cortisol factory, converting inactive cortisol directly into active cortisol right inside your abdominal fat cells. Visceral fat cells actually possess 4 times more cortisol receptors than subcutaneous fat tissue found on your arms or legs. So every stressful, sleepless night literally acts like a targeted biological magnet, pulling floating calories straight into your abdominal cavity. To understand why this loop becomes impossible to break through diet alone, we must look directly inside your gut microbiome. Elevated nighttime cortisol rapidly strips away the protective mucin layer of your intestinal lining in as little as 48 hours of sleep deprivation. Without that thick mucus shield, tight junctions between intestinal cells loosen, allowing microscopic bacterial toxins called lipopolysaccharides to leak into your bloodstream. This low-grade endotoxemia triggers systemic inflammation. which immediately alerts the adrenal glands to secrete even more cortisol to put out the inflammatory fire. At the same time, this high cortisol environment kills off beneficial Akkermansia bacteria while feeding sugar-loving firmicute strains that extract extra calories from your food. Now here is the ultimate trap. That inflammatory gut feedback loop travels directly up the vagus nerve to your brainstem, destroying your sleep architecture. Even if you stay in bed for 8 hours, brain microarousals caused by evening cortisol prevent you from entering stage 3 deep slow-wave sleep. Slow-wave sleep is the exact 90-minute window where your brain flushes out metabolic waste and releases growth hormone to repair metabolic tissue. Without adequate slow-wave sleep, your sympathetic nervous system stays locked in fight or flight mode right through the early hours of the morning. Your heart rate variability plummets and your body wakes up chemically exhausted, priming your adrenals to spike cortisol even higher by noon. This is precisely why cutting calories or grinding through a 6 a.m. boot camp while trapped in this cycle almost always backfires. When you restrict calories in a high cortisol, sleep-deprived state, your thyroid actively downregulates the conversion of T4 into active T3 metabolic hormone. Your resting metabolic rate can drop by 200 to 300 calories a day as your cells go into aggressive energy conservation mode. You end up losing precious calorie-burning muscle tissue instead of fat, which only accelerates the metabolic slowdown and increases cortisol spikes. To escape this crushing downward spiral, we first have to flip the biological switch that controls your nocturnal cortisol rhythm, starting with your evening light exposure. That is precisely why standard calorie deficits backfire when your HPA axis stays chronically activated by late-night stress and broken sleep cycles. At the cellular level, the real culprit isn't just circulating stress hormones, but a specialized intracellular enzyme called 11-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 1. This specific enzyme resides directly inside your visceral fat cells, actively converting inert cortisone into potent active cortisol right where abdominal fat is stored. Because of this localized amplification, your routine morning blood tests can look completely normal while your abdominal adipocytes are literally drowning in active cortisol. That cellular cortisol surge immediately upregulates lipoprotein lipase, the powerful gatekeeper enzyme that aggressively pulls circulating triglycerides straight into your visceral fat cells. When cortisol synergizes with even tiny amounts of circulating insulin, this visceral fat-storing enzyme activity skyrockets by an astonishing 400%. And here is the contrarian truth. Visceral adipocytes express 4 times more cortisol receptors than subcutaneous fat cells, making belly fat exceptionally stress-sensitive. While those belly fat cells lock away triglycerides, elevated evening cortisol simultaneously strips your skeletal muscle tissue of its primary glucose transport mechanisms. Normally, insulin triggers GLUT4 protein vesicles to migrate to the muscle cell membrane after dinner, swiftly clearing excess glucose out of your bloodstream. However, elevated evening cortisol physically traps those GLUT4 transporters deep inside the cell cytoplasm, preventing muscle glucose uptake regardless of what you ate. With skeletal muscle rejecting sugar, blood glucose stays chronically elevated, forcing your pancreas to pump out compensatory surges of late-night insulin just to compensate. This nocturnal hyperinsulinemia directly attacks your sleep architecture, specifically blunting the brain's ability to transition into deep restorative slow-wave sleep cycles. Slow-wave sleep is your ultimate metabolic reset window, where human growth hormone pulses to repair damaged tissues and burn through stored fatty acids. Missing just 2 hours of that critical slow-wave sleep blunts overnight human growth hormone secretion by more than 70%, halting nighttime fat oxidation. Without that growth hormone surge, your body shifts its nocturnal fuel preference away from stored body fat and directly toward muscle protein breakdown. That is why you wake up feeling physically drained, experiencing intense biological cravings for quick, simple sugars within 30 minutes of your morning alarm. To understand this morning exhaustion, look at the circadian timing mismatch between a healthy cortisol awakening response and a flattened dysfunctional stress curve. In a healthy metabolism, your cortisol spikes sharply within 45 minutes of sunrise to mobilize clean energy, then drops steadily throughout the afternoon. When chronic sleep loss disrupts this rhythm, that vital morning surge drops by 40%, leaving you brain fogged and dependent on high-dose caffeine. Then comes the perilous metabolic inversion. Instead of dropping at sunset, your circulating cortisol slowly climbs precisely when it should hit absolute rock bottom. That abnormal evening cortisol elevation commands your liver to initiate gluconeogenesis, synthesizing brand new glucose from circulating amino acids while you are fast asleep. Your liver literally dumps up to 20 grams of endogenous sugar into your bloodstream around 2 in the morning, spiking blood sugar during fasting. That unexpected 2 a.m. sugar surge forces an emergency insulin release, provoking a rapid rebound blood sugar crash that jolts your central nervous system. That sudden 3 a.m. awakening isn't mysterious insomnia, it is a direct neuroendocrine alarm triggered by hepatic gluconeogenesis, followed by reactive nocturnal hypoglycemia, and this overnight cortisol and glucose roller coaster inflicts severe collateral damage on another critical metabolic frontier, your gut lining and intestinal mucosal barrier. Elevated nocturnal cortisol directly suppresses occludin and zonular occludins 1, the structural protein rivets that keep your intestinal tight junctions tightly sealed together against pathogens. As those junctions loosen overnight, bacterial endotoxins called lipopolysaccharides escape from your intestinal lumen directly into the hepatic portal circulation and systemic bloodstream. These circulating endotoxins bind to toll-like receptor 4 on immune cells, igniting low-grade systemic inflammation that keeps the hypothalamus locked on high alert. Here is the exact bidirectional trap. Sleep deprivation spikes cortisol, cortisol damages gut permeability, leaked endotoxins trigger inflammation, and that inflammation destroys subsequent sleep. To permanently shatter this self-reinforcing loop, we must intervene at the cellular enzyme level exactly 12 hours before that evening cortisol inversion begins. Breaking this toxic cortisol loop starts the second you open your eyes tomorrow. Your brain needs a powerful biological trigger to hold overnight glucose production. Within 20 minutes of waking, step outside without sunglasses to catch natural sunlight. Photons hitting your retinal ganglion cells immediately shut off residual melatonin and trigger morning alertness. This natural morning cortisol spike acts like flipping a master switch. It sets a strict 14-hour countdown timer in your brain for tonight's melatonin release. Next, delay your morning coffee by 90 minutes after waking up. Chugging caffeine immediately artificially amplifies that morning glucose surge and traps you in afternoon exhaustion. Waiting 90 minutes lets your brain naturally clear out sleep-inducing adenosine first. When caffeine finally locks into those receptors, you gain steady energy without cravings. Now anchor your breakfast with at least 40 grams of high-quality protein within 2 hours of waking. This stabilizes ghrelin and stops adrenal overcompensation. That protein dose delivers crucial amino acids like tyrosine to your liver. Your body builds steady daytime dopamine without triggering an insulin roller coaster. By 2 in the afternoon, your circadian rhythm hits a natural dip. Reaching for processed carbohydrates right now forces your pancreas into emergency insulin production. Instead of snacking, take a brisk 10-minute walk outdoors. Muscle contractions act like sponges, soaking up excess glucose while flushing circulating cortisol from your bloodstream. Make sure you drink 16 ounces of water with a pinch of sea salt during this slump. Even 2% dehydration triggers your adrenals to release stress hormones. Set a strict afternoon caffeine deadline of 2 p.m. because caffeine has an 8-hour half-life. Late sips secretly destroy your deep restorative sleep waves. When your workday ends, transition out of fight or flight mode before eating dinner. Chronic mental stress keeps your sympathetic nervous system locked in high gear. Perform 5 physiological sighs by taking 2 quick nasal inhales followed by a long mouth exhale. This stimulates your vagus nerve and instantly halts cortisol release. Now you must finish your final meal at least 3 hours before bedtime. Eating late forces your digestive tract to work overtime while melatonin begins rising. Melatonin actually blocks insulin secretion in your pancreas. If you eat dinner right before bed, elevated blood glucose stays trapped inside your circulation all night long. Build your evening meal around soluble fiber, olive oil, and clean proteins. These nutrients digest slowly and keep nocturnal blood sugar perfectly flat until sunrise. Never rely on a glass of wine to fall asleep. While alcohol sedates your brain initially, its metabolic breakdown triggers a violent cortisol rebound by 3 a.m. That sudden awakening at 3 a.m. happens when your liver exhausts its glycogen reserves. Your adrenals pump out emergency cortisol and adrenaline just to restore blood sugar. As the sun sets, dim your indoor lights and put away overhead LEDs. Artificial blue light tricks your suprachiasmatic nucleus into thinking it is still high noon. That evening screen exposure directly halts your natural cortisol decline. Instead of dropping to its absolute lowest point, stress hormone levels remain artificially elevated all evening. Next, set your bedroom thermostat to exactly 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Your core body temperature must drop by 3 degrees to unlock deep, slow wave restorative sleep. Sleeping in a warm room prevents your brown fat cells from burning excess glucose overnight. Even mild overheating triggers micro-awakenings that spike nocturnal cortisol. Taking 300 milligrams of magnesium glycinate 1 hour before bed acts as a natural brake on your nervous system by activating calming GABA receptors directly. Once you enter deep sleep with low cortisol, your brain activates its glymphatic system. Cerebrospinal fluid rushes through, washing away toxic metabolic buildup from your neurons. During that exact same deep sleep window, your pituitary gland surges with human growth hormone. This repair hormone actively burns abdominal fat while preserving lean muscle mass. If high evening cortisol blocks that critical first sleep cycle, your daily growth hormone pulse vanishes completely, your metabolism gets locked in fat storage mode until morning. You cannot fix 5 nights of sleep deprivation by sleeping late on Saturday. Shifting your weekend wake times throws your circadian master clock into severe metabolic jet lag. The ultimate proof your cortisol loop is healing is feeling naturally alert within 30 minutes of waking. You will not need caffeine just to feel functioning anymore. Within 3 weeks of enforcing this daily protocol, your leptin sensitivity rebounds completely. Your brain finally hears the satiety signal, and stubborn belly fat begins melting away. But what if you execute this exact sleep protocol and still wake up exhausted? that points directly to a hidden gut microbiome disruption that blocks cortisol breakdown. To permanently shut down nocturnal cortisol production, trigger thermoregulation exactly 90 minutes before sleep by stepping into a hot shower or sauna for 20 minutes. As your skin cools off afterward, core body temperature drops sharply, signaling your pineal gland to release melatonin without any synthetic supplements. Combine this thermal drop with 400 mg of magnesium glycinate and 200 mg of L-theanine to directly quiet overactive glutamate neurons in the brain. This specific amino acid and mineral pairing binds to GABA receptors, lowering central nervous system excitability, so you enter slow-wave sleep faster every single night. Once you achieve uninterrupted deep sleep during those crucial first 3 hours, your pituitary gland surges with growth hormone, your primary nocturnal fat-burning engine. That nighttime pulse of growth hormone activates hormone-sensitive lipase inside visceral adipocytes. By morning, your circulating ghrelin levels stay suppressed while insulin sensitivity rebounds, keeping your waking fasting blood sugar below 90 mg per deciliter effortlessly. To anchor this reset, get outdoors within 30 minutes of waking so 10,000 lux of natural sunlight hits your melanopsin retinal ganglion cells directly. Those blue photons immediately halt morning melatonin and start a strict 16-hour neural timer, ensuring cortisol bottoms out exactly when your head hits the pillow tonight. Delay your morning coffee by 90 minutes so adenosine clears out naturally, preventing an artificial cortisol surge that otherwise blocks fat oxidation all afternoon. When your cortisol rhythm aligns with deep sleep architecture, your body burns stored triglycerides automatically without restrictive dieting or extreme cardio sessions draining your adrenal glands. That is how you break the loop forever and reclaim your metabolism without spending extra dollars on useless supplements. Sleep becomes your most powerful metabolic prescription. Like this video to support real science, and comment your average bedtime below. Subscribe for more, because next week we reveal how gut inflammation secretly drives insulin resistance.